Hello everyone, welcome back to the Sharmit podcast. Today I'm excited to welcome a very special guest, Armen Vardanyan. Armen is joining us today all the way from Armenia. If I talk more about Armen, then he is one of the well-known Google developer expert in Angular and currently working as a principal front-end developer with a passion for web technologies. Arman's journey into the IT is truly remarkable, and being a part of GDE program has further amplified his impact in in tech community. Over the years, he has contributed extensively to the platform like Angular Space, This is Angular, and InDepth as a technical writer. Not only this, as a panelist on the Adventures in Angular podcast, and as an author for the modern Angular programming book, Arman continues to share his expertise on cutting edge topics. So, today in this episode, we will discuss Arman's journey into the IT industry. But before we start the discussion, I would like to thank Arman for joining us today in this episode. And now I request you to please initiate the discussion by telling us something about yourself.
Hi, Amit. Thanks for inviting me. Hello, everyone who's listening. Uh, well, it's pretty exciting to be here. I'm usually a panelist, so I usually meet guests on the podcast, and it's fun from time to time to be the guest yourself. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a great discussion. There's so much, exciting stuff going on with Angular nowadays. So I think it's gonna be great.
Yes, and it is pretty much sure that we are going to have a great discussion around Angular and other GD related contribution that he is doing through his work. So today we are going to have a good discussion on that. Okay, all right. So Arman, let's start with the basic thing first. Like we just want to know a bit about your journey. So just to kick off the things, could you please share a bit about your journey into the IT industry and how like you got the GD nomination, GD recognition?
That's interesting. That's been quite a journey, I guess. Well, I was interested in software and programming when I was back in school. I learned I used some textbooks to teach myself some C++ and PHP. I don't know. I didn't know what all of that stuff meant. I just tried to learn as much as I can. And when I was like, I guess 20, 21, I started looking for a job. And I started as a PHP developer actually. But on my very first day at my first job, the employer was like, "Can you do Python? We actually need like a junior Python dev. Can you learn Python?" And I was like, "Okay, let's do it." But when I was working on a backend project, I was working on the backend back then, like 9 years ago, I think. There was the front end part written in Angular JS. Angular, as we know today, didn't exist back then. And
Okay.
it was fascinating for me. So I started asking for tasks on the front end too, because I was interested in JavaScript and everything that was going on there. And at some point, they decided that I'm better off just doing front end. I started doing a project on Angular JS. I learned a lot on that project. And then next year, Angular 2 came out, like the initial version that we have of Angular that we know today. I also switched my job. I started working on an Angular project as it is, and for 3 years, I climbed the ladder. I became an experienced developer. Then I was a senior developer, and I think at some point I just realized that when I learn a lot of stuff, it's interesting for me to share it with people. I did
Right.
trainings internally. I started mentoring people for JavaScript, like newcomers, beginners on JavaScript and other JavaScript libraries and so on. And I started writing content. I started writing articles. And I got a bit lucky at that point because I remember one important point was that I wrote an article that outlined some problems with PrimeNG, the Angular UI library, very popular. And it got popular on Twitter, and somehow it got to the PrimeNG tech lead. And he said that he really appreciated the article and he has referred it to their team to figure out what they can fix, what they can open discussions about. And
Okay.
that I really appreciated that, and that really motivated me to write more because I kind of saw a material impact. Then I started writing for InDepth. At some point, I was invited. I started writing articles, and they've got reviews and so on. Because before that, I was just self-publishing, and it's okay to publish content on your own, but when you have people
Right.
who are more experienced who can review your stuff, your content gets better, and you're more seasoned as a writer. And then I thought that maybe I can apply for the GDE program. And Santosh Yadav, I think Angular enthusiasts very probably know him. He's a very good friend of mine. He's very popular in the Angular community and in the open source community. He nominated me in 2021. And well, then I passed the interviews and got admitted into the program. And after that, I continued to do what I was doing previously, talking at conferences, writing content. Then I got
Right.
into adventures in Angular, podcasting, and so on. So it was a long journey. It still is a long journey. I really like it. And I love talking to people, helping people out with their problems. And I always learn a lot myself in the process because no one ever knows everything. And
Correct.
teaching, helping out, seeking out for new challenges is always like it's gonna give you way more edge on learning new things rather than just reading all day or whatever.
Correct. Right. All right. So when we look towards your journey, it seems that most of your time or your most of core competencies in Angular, because you have good expertise on that area. So when it comes to Angular, like what's your favorite part or aspect that you think that yes, this is something that really sets it apart from the other framework of uh, other frameworks. So what do you think? Like what are those areas?
That's a really great question because I have a really like specific answer to that. I always know which is one top thing I like about Angular, and this is dependency injection. I have a
Okay.
lot of content on it. In my book, I have a whole chapter dedicated to just this new inject function.
Yeah.
Uh, what I like about it is that it's so well designed. If you actually like forget about the code, forget about like broader stuff, go on the Angular repository on GitHub and try to search for issues and pull requests and commits that relate to dependency injection. You will find very few because it is so well designed, so well understood that that I guess there isn't much to improve about it actually. Like
Okay.
the inject function since the beginning of the this whole Angular 2 framework and the movement, the inject function was the only thing that was actually new about dependency injection. This new stuff that really changed everything. If you take a look at all the other packages in the Angular ecosystem, all of them are going through different processes that they change, and it's normal. But dependency injection is so solid, it's so well designed that I really love it, and it really sets it apart from everything else. Because when you think about other frameworks, if you think about other libraries, and all of them have their merits, they have their own edges over Angular and so on. It's obvious, but in that department, like every single one of those frameworks and libraries, they all want to have something like dependency injection. Like if you take React, for example, they have the context API, the use context, and so on,
Yeah.
providers and so on. It's very similar. It's actually almost exactly the same in terms of like the idea behind it. But they have their own limitations, and they're good enough. Okay, they're not bad, obviously. But Angular DI is so great in terms of like designing stuff. If you really know Angular dependency injection, you can elevate the architecture of your project so much
Mhm.
uh, that it's frankly a bit disappointing to me that lots of people don't know the real depth of the DI mechanism and so on. That's why I'm writing so much content on it. It may seem a simple
Correct.
topic, like initially when you come to Angular, it's like, okay, you have a service injected somewhere, blah, 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 it works. It's fine for 90% of cases, but there's this 10% of cases that are way more complex. And when you really know dependency injection, you can solve so many problems when you essentially write bad code. If you don't know DI well, you can design a good solution in some
Yeah.
cases, but if you don't know about it, you will end up writing some bad code and then you will regret it and you'll think about how do I solve
Right.
this complexity. So yeah, dependency injection certainly takes the top for me. Absolutely.
Okay. And Arman, like when we talk about your professional journey, so you got an opportunity to work as a principal. You got an opportunity to work as a principal front end developer, right? So, as a principal for front end developer, what you think, like what are the key trends are there that you see as that you see shaping the future of the front end development? Because now the thing has drastically changed, right? The things which were previously there for front end development is completely changed now. So, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, sure. There are, I think, two sides to this. One side is the user experience, and one side is the developer experience. And
Yeah,
right now, I think both of them are reshaping in terms of, well, we have AI and so on, and
correct.
everyone is building a product now. Lots of products are bad. We have to
Yeah,
admit it. Yeah, there's lots of hype and so on. In terms of user experience, I think that right now we have this amazing technology of AI that can solve lots of problems, generate lots of content very quickly.
hmm,
But people are thinking more about, okay, most of the AIs that we know, usually how we interact with them is chatbots. There's an input, we write text, click the button, it generates something. But most of the problems that we're solving are a bit more complex than that. Often we use that for generating text that we already know what we want in terms of the text. We're just a bit lazy to type it. So we ask the AI to, okay, I want this, and then I would a bit edit it and so on. But good UX now will be something that will probably be able to incorporate like AI stuff into other actions. And I see interesting trends in agents and so on when you can schedule tasks and they will be done using AI and so on, pass the task through different agents and so on and so forth. And I think in terms of UX, yeah, it will be important to use these AI tools to build UX that is a bit more than just text generation and chatting and asking to solve problems. Something that could do something more complex in terms of tech to advance it. In terms of developer experience, well, it's a bit more tricky. If we talk about front end, well, reactive programming is the hot topic right now. Every
yeah,
single framework that we know does something about it. So Angular has signals now. We had RxJS for a long time, and people were kind of, some embraced it, some didn't like it. But
yeah,
signals, I think, have a more uniform support from the community. And reactive programming is big because I now realize that it really fits into the front end paradigm. Like the stuff that we brought over from the back end, for example, like this model view controllers and all of these words sound very 2012, right?
yeah,
And those things are not bad, but we realize that in front end we have lots of parallel tasks, lots of stuff going on. It's not so simple as those previous models of thinking that we had. And reactive programming is kind of reshaping it all. I like what SolidJS does. Obviously, Angular team liked that too. That's why they decided to use signals as our own like model for reactive programming in the front end. And it's fascinating because it is not only affecting the developer experience. Obviously, it's easier and more comfortable writing signals and so on, and all the
yeah,
tools that they provide. But it also improves performance. It allows Angular to, as they state, their goal is to ditch Zone.js. So yeah, I think reactive programming for developer experience is probably the key topic right now in front-end development,
correct.
regardless of Angular, for all front-end stuff, I think.
Yes, right. Okay, so Arman, like you have also mentored JavaScript developers, and you also contributed as a technical writer to platforms like Angular Space, This is Angular, and InDepth, right? So,
Yeah.
although like you have mentioned the reason behind it, but just we want to learn more about it. Like, what were those initial things were there that sparked your interest into this writing area? Like, how you decided that yes, this is the right time to write the books and articles?
I think maybe when I just, but I'm self-taught, okay,
Okay,
and that means that I read a lot of stuff on internet, right?
correct.
And I went. Medium was very popular back then. Everyone was writing there, and people usually didn't create like this segregated spaces of Angular this and JavaScript that, and so on. And on Medium, I saw lots of articles on lots of topics. And I remember, I think the very, very first article that I wrote was about back then that we had this bundler. It was called Grunt. I think it still exists, though we have way more modern tools right now. And Grunt was popular with Angular JS devs for like bundling tasks like Minify CSS and so on. I remember writing an article about that because I came up with some interesting setup for doing this common task, and I was like, okay, I'm reading all of these articles, and why not write one myself? Like I can just go on Medium, I can create this beautiful article, I can upload it, and then people will see it. Maybe someone will find it useful. And I just said, yeah, okay, if it's something they can just do, why not do it, right?
Right.
And then I kind of liked it. I started creating more content, especially when I started working with Angular 2. It was new. I had this benefit of arriving at it at its very inception. So lots of people who started like afterwards, like in 2 3 years after Angular 2 was initially released, they didn't have this edge. Like you're working with this technology as it is evolving. There are lots of questions, lots of people trying to find answers, trying to understand best practices. So from my perspective, it was like an easy decision. Why not write content about it? At
Correct.
work, I'm working on an interesting task. I discovered something interesting in the framework, some interesting and useful way of solving a problem. Why not write an article about it? It can be useful to someone. It will definitely teach me something, and it will definitely like expand my social circle. This will allow
Yeah.
me to meet more people, and sure, why not? I met a lot of people, and I learned a lot from them, and I mean a lot. It's
Correct.
really the most. If you just think the personal aspect of it is very beneficial to me too. Like it would be beneficial to anyone. I always urge people like just write stuff. I don't.
Correct.
I'm not even saying like publish it. If you don't want to publish it, it's okay, but you can write for yourself. You can like
Agree.
summarize your thoughts, put it somewhere, and you will discover that sort of like your brain starts working in a different way, and you see way more
Correct.
things when you try to put it into words. So yeah.
Okay, so like as we can see that you have actively contributing to this industry as a GD for Angular as well as JavaScript, right? So my question is like with your so far experience, what you think like what are the some common challenges faced by developers when they start learning about JavaScript or Angular? So is there any particular thing that you think that yes, this is something that everyone is facing nowadays when learning the technologies?
Yeah, I can absolutely talk about it because often when I'm doing mentoring,
Hmm.
usually students come before they decide if they actually want to start learning it. They come
Right.
to some meetings or interviews and where they can ask questions about what fits them best. They are a bit overwhelmed about everything that is going on. Take JavaScript, it's insane. We have so many libraries, so many frameworks, so many approaches. There's a lot of stuff to learn. Like if you just think about JavaScript as a language, well, it's a language like any other language, programming language that exists. It has the same commands, the same operators. Yeah, maybe it's syntactically a bit different, but the ideas are the same. It's a programming language. But the
Right.
ecosystem is terrifying for newcomers. That's
Correct.
why everyone learns React, okay? Because everyone knows, oh, well, React is simple, okay? And you can easily summarize React as oh, you write a function, there's JSX, you can return HTML elements from your functions. Okay, pick this and that, build your components, and that's it.
Right.
And that's where Angular comes in because Angular used to be way harder. It is, of course, getting simpler and simpler by the day because it's a big, big goal for the team and for all of us. Because if even if we are okay with the complexities of the framework, if we are also educators, obviously would prefer our topic to be simpler, right? So I think in terms of Angular, it's more that it's not as complex as people would like to say. I mean, it's just a very tailored framework in terms of like it provides everything. If you think about it, if you learn React, just React, okay, it's all about rendering stuff. It does it great and it works. It's simple. But when you bring in other tasks,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what should I do if I want to do HTTP calls?
Yeah.
And every React developer has lots of answers to that question. So there, on the second stage, React developers are going to get overwhelmed. That always happens. There are lots of opinions, and React is very freestyle about it, which is okay. I mean, it's just a preference. But if you're building something big with React, if you're a big team, you need an authority figure there. In Angular, it's a bit more lax because Angular itself, I have all the tools, use it. This you should do this way, and the other thing you should do the other way. It's more opinionated, and that's why we appreciate it. Lots of people don't appreciate it, which is also okay. Some people think, well, I can just design my own architecture, I can design my own stuff. But lots of people and people like me like what Angular offers. It says I'm a bit more strict about everything. Here is all the toolbox you need. Start building with it. And on that stage, it feels a bit overwhelming because if you look at Angular, there are so many topics like forms,
Right.
signals, RxJS, dependentization, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, all the other frameworks have that same topic. It's not like people are not
Correct.
building forms in React, right? It's just that React doesn't have something inside of it that you have. At some point, you will learn some library that works with forms or routing, right? There is the React router, which correct me if I'm wrong, is also like official from the React team. It's not a like third party thing, right? So it has all the same tools, but it's branded a bit different. Like React, I'm this simple small thing, but you will have to learn all of the other stuff to be able to actually build workable applications. So yeah, I think the availability of so many tools, I think, is the biggest challenge. People get
Correct.
decision paralysis from it, right? You look at JavaScript, there's so much stuff, and you think, should I know React or Angular? Maybe I should know both. And in that situation, a good authority figure, a good mentor that will guide you, that will give you all the pros and cons is really important in that sense.
Correct. Okay. Now, at this moment, I just want to inform everyone that Arman is also running one podcast, which is for Angular community, which is Adventures in Angular. So, Arman, as a panelist of that podcast, what have been some of the most memorable or impactful discussion you have had on that show? Like, because every day you have to interact with some like-minded people who are also having expertise on Angular. So, is there any particular memorable experience?
I think it was very interesting to talk to Jessica Yanyuk.
Okay.
If our listeners don't know, she's from the Angular core team and
Okay.
she's working on the server-side experience. Actually, if you watched the Angular 19 video, the announcement video, she was in that video explaining SSR and hydration and
Okay.
partial hydration. And I think 8 months or around that before Angular 19, she was a guest on Adventures in Angular, and we had very interesting discussion about what SSR is. And SSR isn't yet a very big topic in Angular because people are just now pivoting to saying, okay, if we want the server side part of the application, or we need something on the server side, we need better
Mhm.
SEO and so on. We don't need to actually ditch Angular. Let's just use Angular SSR. It works. It's good. And she did a great job explaining what are the challenges and why it has been a bit slow. Because we were talking for years about, well, Next.js is next door and they're doing great stuff with SSR and so on, and static site generation and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very insightful discussion. And after that, I was like, yeah, I actually really appreciate what they did with SSR because it is quite a complex task. That one was a great discussion. And another one, we had a discussion with, sadly, I don't remember the name of the guest, but they
Mhm.
were actually working on a backend task and they were using this event management approach where you use your database as a storage for events rather than entities. So
Okay.
imagine that like you have, you don't store a record of a user,
Mhm.
okay, in the database. It's a simple example. But instead, you store events relating to that user. So the very first event would be like the user registered, here is their data. Then maybe the
Okay.
user changed their password. Okay, next event, user changed password. So you have the whole record history of what happened to this entity. And you could do all sorts of things, like you can undo an operation, you can do a transaction in an
Okay.
atomic way. You could, it was very fascinating, and it was actually something that you could use on the front end too, because if you have state management library like NGRX or NGXS or whatever, you could use that approach to build, for example, like WYSIWYG editors where you have undo redo functionality. You could have, for example, some websites have like your visitation patterns, right? So you
Okay.
visit this link and that link and that link, and you could use that pattern to easily store it somewhere like in local storage or whatever to easily help the user navigate your website if you have like a complex application. So that one was really fascinating discussion because I thought, well, okay, well, what are we talking about if we're not talking about Angular on this episode? But actually, we are able to tie in this approach to something that you can easily do in Angular, and it's like very beneficial. So yeah, I would say that was one of the very interesting discussions we had on Angular.
Okay, so here I would like to recommend everyone that who are interested in such type of discussion moving around Angular, please go and check out his podcast because he's doing a lot of work for this community, and the way like they are interacting with each other and sharing their knowledge, it's very useful, and everyone should watch, specifically those who are interested in Angular technology. So I must recommend everyone. All right, so Arman, I think now it's time to talk bit about your life, bit about your bit about the person who have influenced your journey. So could you please tell bit about the mentor or maybe the colleague or a family member like who have played a vital role in your professional growth as well as a personal growth? So could you please tell bit about that?
That's a great question. Actually, I would like to mention two people,
Okay.
and one of them I have already mentioned, Santosh Yadav.
Yeah.
He is just a great guy. I just want to say that he not only mentored me a lot, he helped me on my journey to become GDE. He
Hmm.
was also a reviewer, tech reviewer for my book, Modern Angular, that you mentioned
Okay.
previously. He was a tech reviewer. He did a great job. He really helped the book to grow, to be as up to date as it can be. And he's just really inspiring person. I think our listeners that work with Angular definitely know him.
Hmm.
So big shout out to Santosh. I'm
Yeah.
really thankful to everything he did for me. And the other person I'd like to mention is Lars Nilsson.
Hmm.
He's Microsoft MVP. He's also working on Angular. And he also wrote a book, but a bit earlier, I think like 4 years ago, I guess. He has a book specifically about the Angular's Ivy engine, the rendering engine.
Okay.
I think all of us got familiar with each other during the times when we were writing content for InDepth. And Lars reviewed lots of my articles, and he was very friendly and helpful. And he really kind of helped me discover myself as a more serious writer. And when I got my offer to write a book about Angular, my very first thought was, I have to call Lars and ask for advice. Okay.
Okay.
And I called him, we scheduled a call, we had a nice discussion. He was very honest. He talked about all the challenges that you would have.
Yeah.
And he said one thing that I remember. He said, like, don't think about how many people would read this or will I earn a lot of money about it. Just think about if you really want to do it, if you really feel like you want to write a book about Angular, then do it. And even if very few people read it, you will still feel very satisfied about it. And right now that my book is already in print, I can say he's 100% correct. And he really
Okay.
helped me to establish myself as a writer and gave me great advice. So another shout out to Lars. I'm very thankful.
All right. Okay. So, Arman, like there are many things that we can discuss here in this podcast regarding your expertise in Angular, but just because of the limitation of time, I would like to ask one question because this is something that always moving around Angular and it's related to signals because we often hear about signals. So, could you please tell like what exactly the signals are and what should we expect from them? and how it will finally affect the RxJS in Angular. Because whenever there is a discussion moving around Angular, everyone is talking about that yes, it is affecting the RxJS. So just elaborate it in a few minutes so that everyone have that understand.
Yeah, well, if someone who is listening right now hasn't caught up on that, signals are essentially wrappers around values. So
Okay.
instead of creating a variable that has a number value, for example, 6, right? You
Yeah.
create a signal that has that value inside. And signal is a function that you can call and get the current value. And you
Okay.
can set and update that value however you want. But the cool thing about signals is that they are reactive, which means we can write functions that execute when the signal value changes, right?
Okay.
So we can write effects, we can give a callback, and Angular will track which signals we use in that effect. And when those signals change, this function will re-execute. So it's super useful in front end where, for example, you can tie it with an input, user is typing something, and okay, here you are making an HTTP call because the user typed something and the value changed. So it's a great thing. And you can
Okay.
also derive new values from it. So you can create signals that incorporate values from other signals. This all sounds a bit similar to what ArcGIS is doing. So we have observables, we can react to them, we can subscribe to them and do some actions. We can create new observables from existing ones. So they're similar in that sense that they are both reactive building blocks. But
Okay.
ArcGIS is, of course, way more complex, and Angular's goal with signals is to simplify everything. We don't
Mm-hmm.
need this whole big ArcGIS thing to do a simple stuff to solve a day-to-day task. And ArcGIS you can sort of keep for more complex tasks and for things that are not exactly signals, right? Like event
Okay.
streams, sockets, HTTP, and so on. Um, uh, I remember that Angular did a survey where they asked people. Essentially, the question was like, do you want more or less RxJS in Angular? Like, do you want a better support for RxJS or do you want less RxJS in your Angular apps? And it was like 50-50, like exactly
Okay.
50-50. Half the people said, yeah, we love RxJS, we want more of that, please give us better support. And the other 50% said, I don't like it, why do we have it? It's another dependency, it's a lot of stuff to learn. So Angular did that. They are making RxJS optional, but they are giving way better support for it. Okay.
Okay.
So if lots of people reaching out to me with this question, are we ditching RxJS? Is it going away? No, it's not. It's and I'm not speculating. This is like the official position of the Angular team. RxJS will stay, but it will become optional. So if you don't want it, all of the tools that you have, you can use without RxJS, build however you want. If you like it,
Okay.
there are so many new tools, optional tools that you can just bring over and use it to have way better like experience with RxJS. So yeah, signals are exciting, but they're not going to kill RxJS if we sum it up
Okay.
like that.
All right. Thanks for this clarity. All right. So thank you so much, Aman, for joining us in this episode and for sharing so much information regarding the Angular and about your journey. It was really very nice talking with you. So thank you once again and have a good wishes for your upcoming projects.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you. And thanks to
Thank you.
everyone who is listening.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.